Good afternoon. Good afternoon. How do you follow the NFL alumni choir? Wow, what a special treat. But I'm very, very excited to be able to moderate this amazing panel of these wonderful women during Black History Month. And so certainly you can Google them, you can find them on LinkedIn and read their amazing bios, but I would like to just provide just an introduction to their background. Again, my name is Debbie Stroman, and the Sports Spotlight series is something that I started a number of years ago and had the opportunity to partner with Ron Rice, former NFL player, in particular with the Detroit Lions, and then with Dr. Robert Turner. And we've been putting on webinars and in-person sessions just talking about life after sports and how we transition well, and what are the tools and the resources. And so to be able to bring Sports Spotlight to the Black Men's Brain Health Conference has been what many consider one of the highlights. And so today we have the women's panel, and then tomorrow we will have the men's panel, which will be moderated by Guy Troop. So I want to start off by introducing coach, leader, director, Pat Kendrick from Xavier University. She is the executive director of athletics and recreation for the university, and she's also the head volleyball coach. I could go on and on about her acknowledgments, her credentials. How about 23 Coach of the Year awards? Wow. How about she's a Hall of Fame athlete from George Mason University. She was a hurdler in track and field. And here's one where you just have to gasp. In 2017, the volleyball team, it was the first team in the state of Louisiana to never lose a set against conference opponents, an 86% winning percentage. Welcome, Coach Kendrick. The next person is my new friend over the past, year, Carmen? Nope, not you, Hager. We're going to talk about you. Carmen McZeal. She is the CEO, she's the co-chairperson of Edge Sports Counseling. I've never heard of this before, but because I do study and read, I know what these words mean. Listen to one of the certifications that she has. Eye movement desensitization and advanced training in mental health, mindfulness, and she's a certified clinical trauma professional. Welcome, Carmen McZeal. And the woman in pink is Dr. Hagar, I'm gonna make sure I pronounce it correctly, Elgini. Yes, Elgini. She is my colleague at UNC Chapel Hill. She is a physician. She was a D1 swimmer at University of Miami, 7 national championship titles, and a national record. She did her master's in neuroscience, and she founded the first research-based course at Tulane. And she has great interest in concussions at UNC. Welcome, Doc. So over this time together, we're going to get to know them. We want to share their journey with you. And hopefully you will take away something that will inspire you. Great women. So let's go down the row here, and how about if you tell us first a bit about your journey as it connects to sports and how you came to be in your current career. Coach?
So I started, I guess, in 8th grade. We want to go back that far. Mrs. Green, who is at Hayfield Secondary in Alexandria, Virginia, asked me if I wanted to go out for the track team. And I was like, okay. And so I did that, and so that kind of started me on sports. And all through high school, I was actually her field hockey manager. She wanted me to play field hockey. But when I saw the sticks and I saw somebody swinging them around, I said, not for me. I'll help line the field. So that's what my job was as a manager. I played basketball. We didn't have volleyball back in high school when I was there. But I was a cheerleader, I ran track, I played basketball, and then ended up going to George Mason University. I actually tried out for a basketball scholarship at the University of Maryland, and that didn't go so well. So I ended up at George Mason, played volleyball, actually came across volleyball then, and ran track. And so I did that for 4 years. And Kim Sears, who was the head coach my senior year, asked me to be her assistant. So I was an assistant for Kim for 2 years, and then she stepped into an academic coordinator position for the athletic department. So I became the head coach in 1985, before probably most of you were born or still in diapers. So started doing that. So I was the head coach at George Mason for 30, and during that time I was an assistant coach for the men's team for 1 season, but primarily was coaching volleyball. And then retired from George Mason, ended up at Virginia Tech for 2 years as their director of volleyball operations. So basically I was kind of the glorified manager. I kind of made sure they got to where they needed to go, where they were going to eat, when the bus was going to show up, all of those things. So I managed the team for 2 years, and then wanted to get back into coaching. The Xavier job became open, and so I applied and ended up here in 2017, and was primarily just coaching volleyball. And then Jason Horn, who was the athletic director at that time, asked me if I wanted to be an assistant athletic director. And so I did that, and did that for a couple of years. Nathan Cochran came in as AD after that. And then when Nathan left, VP Wright, Curtis Wright, called me up, and I think maybe I was the only one that picked up the phone, because he said, "You want to be the AD?" And I went, "Okay." And so that was about 2-3 years ago or something. So that's kind of how I ended up where I am. But if anybody asks me what I do here, I say I'm the volleyball coach. If the AD thing comes up, it just happens to come up.
Thank you. Doc?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. So I would say that I wear many hats. So I'm a mom to 5 kids. My kids are ages 8 and under. Swimming was my safe haven, so I swam for 18 years of my life, ultimately represented my country as Egypt for the 2012 Olympic trials. I got second place at that point in my life. My life was really merging lanes, so I was at Tulane University, where I got my master's degree in neuroscience, and I was a part of the team at Tulane that was founding what stands today as the Trust. So we came up with what we envisioned post-retired NFL player care to look like, not just medical care, but comprehensive transitional care, mental health care, life and wellness, you name it. We had a vision for what we believed that NFL players deserved post their retirement. So we ended up earning that grant. It was $1 million grant at Tulane, which is exciting, because now coming back, it looks like it's standing as a nationally renowned brain institute. So it was awesome to be a part of that seed team there at Tulane. Then my life took me to Cincinnati, where my husband played 8 years in the league. So he played most of our time with the Cincinnati Bengals. He probably could have been up here in this choir. He can sing too, so I'll have to sign him up. And then we had most of our kids in our time in Cincinnati, and now we're in North Carolina. So I'm a chief resident there at UNC, and I'm doing my sports medicine fellowship next year on the sideline with Bill Belichick. So I'm excited about that. So long journeys. I'm also the vice president of the NFL Wives Association, the off-the-field NFL Wives Association. So wear many hats. Intrinsic to all those different hats is very much, I would say, grace. I'm only standing here by God's grace in each of those different seasons of my life. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. And Carmen.
Yes. Well, my journey didn't begin in sports. My journey really began with me. I was going back to my childhood. I was a really compliant child, but I was very inquisitive. I wanted to always know the whys and hows. Oftentimes they were met with because that's just the way that it is, or because I said so. And so as time went on, I was just thinking, okay, as I grew older, I want to know the whys. I want to understand it on a higher level. I saw how family members responded to things and how it impacted behavior, and then what you think really affects how you respond. And all of that drew my interest into seeking my graduate degree with a background in psychology and counseling. When I did that, I wanted to know I need that aha of why. Okay, and so as time went on, what I thought about was I wanted to produce for myself and for anyone that I come in contact with, show them the impact of what the mind could have over the body and how we responded. In doing that, how I entered into sports later in life was honestly through my children. My children began playing sports and they did very well. So well that they're All-Americans, even 2 times national champions. In that I saw how, but in order to get the mind to meet their talent, I had to work with them. So that's when my history of it being behavior and psychology and counseling, we had to adjust and work with how they responded in those situations. How many of us has actually seen that athlete who lost the game before the game was over? That's how they were responding. What you say and think, your body, you can see it in your body language and your responses. So I started to work with them, and when their mind met their talent, they looked totally different. Okay, and so that's kind of how I got into sports. In doing that, then coaches and parents, and it just kind of evolved, and can you work with my child? And it's just the evolutionary process of what happens. I remember a quote from Muhammad Ali saying that he was the greatest long before he believed it. That's what my kind of like my guiding principle. If I can get you to see that what you say and what you think in sports, right? And not in your life. It just transfers over to every aspect of your life. Your life can look and be a lot different. As we went on with my kids and the coaches, and we're just getting new opportunities, I was able to build a business surrounded by what I was just doing naturally and what I was built for, what I was inquisitive about. And hence that's EDGE. EDGE Sports Counseling, all derived from a little girl who needed to know why.
Thank you. So I'd like to give a shout out to Joanne Pugh, if you could raise your hand. Joanne is one of the leaders in this space, NFL mothers, right? And so I call her out, I give her a shout out because she's one of those persons who's making a great deal of difference for people on this journey. And so I turn to you all. Do you have a particular person or event that helped inspire you along the way with your journey? Hager, Doc?
Sure. Well, yes, definitely Miss Pugh. So we met at the Super Bowl a couple years ago, and I just fell under her wing. I would say that in my life, it's the people that you wouldn't expect to be the humblest. So those that are leading different organizations with as many titles as you can think, with 35-page CVs, have exemplified to me a spirit of humility, taken me under their wing, and I've always been with the mentality of, you know, I don't know that I just need mentors in my life. I need advocates. I need people to break down barriers in front of me, open doors that I can't open myself because I'm just not in that season yet in my life. And I've had that, you know, again, by God's grace in every season of my life up to this point and in different capacities. So when I think of who I am as a physician, as a mother, as a leader in the nonprofit, you know, as a part of the NFL Wives Association, and every capacity God has always placed somebody in my life to help break down doors that I just would not get there on my own accord. So I can name many, and I would honor them today, and I will honor them today in my heart, but it's too many to list.
Thank you. Coach?
Well, I would say just having the opportunity to even just participate in athletics. As I said, back when I was in 8th grade, Mrs. Green, she was the one that kind of started it all, and I look back on the fact that if she hadn't asked me to run on the track team, I wouldn't have had that path, because I wasn't necessarily in a good place when she asked me, but I certainly wouldn't be here without her.
Thank you. Carmen?
Yes, well, I see mine's, it's not necessarily a pinpoint one or two individuals. I think it's just a collective of our entire life and our existence, right? What brings us here, we're all a bundle of experiences. So how I kind of group it is, I think what has impacted me the most has been my experiences based on the shape that I am. I don't mean my physical shape, right? But I mean mentally who I am in this current state. And how I equate that is, I just think about it as we have our gifts. So you have your gifts that you just naturally do well, don't do well. Then you add that with the need around you, right? So it just who I am as a person, being inquisitive and wanting to help, that helping spirit, wanting to know the whys to make all of us better, then coupled with the need around me. What do I see? What Dr. Stroman may see or Hagar, our coach, will see around them is based on what appeals to you as an individual. So what I see, so for me, when I think about, boy, our world needs a lot of help, I just look on social media or watch the news, right? And then I can see that there's a lot of, the need is great. So you take the gifts that the way I'm naturally built, couple with the needs around me, and then with that, you actually throw in your calling, what you're called to do. I'm built for what I'm doing. It's just naturally. I remember being that girl, God, please get me out of the classroom and have me work with someone one-on-one, please. I just need that one-on-one, because it's just how I'm built. I like the connection of one-on-one. All of that equals and transpires into your destiny. And you end up you're where you are because this is where you need to be. So it's the collective, right? All of our experiences, all of those things equate to where we are today.
Thank you. So we have a lot of young people in the room today, and I'd like you to speak to them in terms of life lessons, the things that you learned maybe at a young age or as you've aged. I think about my mother telling me that you're a leader, not a follower. That stays with me. And the scriptures, Galatians 6:9. I try to remember that all the time. So any particular life lessons? Coach?
I always steal Maya Angelou's quote of, if somebody shows you who they are, believe them the first time. And so I think about that a lot, but that doesn't mean that you can't have an influence on them at some point, regardless of who they are and how they came in your space, but that's something that I think about a lot.
Yeah, I would say the verse that comes to mind for me is, you hear of Philippians 4:13 and that I can do everything through Christ who strengthens me, but the verse that comes immediately before that speaks on contentment. So I know what it is to be in need. I know what it is to have plenty or be in want. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So the secret, in a sense, is Jesus Christ himself and being content in that. And I feel like over the course of my life, it's been a matter of me learning to be content in him alone and not so much pursuing a title or an achievement. It's being content in the space that he has me, and those things will come in time because I firmly believe that he has me destined for great things. But being content in where he has me and having the faith to persevere in that he will get me there. Just be content in where he has you in this season.
I love that. I love that. Well, what I've learned the most, and any advice that I would give, is the importance of letting go. Oftentimes we fight against those things that are meant to build us up and strengthen us, right? But because it doesn't always look good and feel good, we're always looking for a buffer, an aid, something to suppress or extinguish, to diminish, or just help us to forget in that moment. So what I do is, part of what I've learned through this process of always needing to know why, sometimes you won't. And you have to be okay with that. So letting it go, right? And perfection is not the key. Growth is. So that's my advice. Thank you.
So we're all also here to celebrate Black History Month by lifting up the resilience of women. How we show up, how we support others, and how we serve others. Now, you all have definitely lived lives of service as a developer of young mind, whether your own biological or young people in your sphere. How are you, or did you manage your own stress as a leader? In what ways do you teach and practice healthy living? Carmen?
Yes. Well, for me, intermittent isolation is a requirement for me. I need that to refuel, and it's on a daily basis. What that looks like, that may be 30 minutes, it may be 15, I may have to split up an hour in 4-part increments. It's whenever I get it, but it is a need and a requirement for me. You need that to be able to think and to separate yourselves from all of the noise. That feeling, that need some of us may have with our electronics. If I don't have my phone, then I have to travel back 30 miles to get it because I left it at home. No, sometimes you need that. So that's what I would encourage. So intermittent isolation, and also, too, what I've expressed and would encourage all of us to take the time that we need and to give ourselves what we need and not be motivated and guided by what we think we ought to be doing for sole purpose of looking busy and feeling accomplished because we have all of the things. When you have all of the things, you have to deal with all of the things, and that's when it could be a little overwhelming.
Doc?
Yes, I would say I love my intermittent isolation on the drive home from work, because I'm not going to get that at home with five little kids. So I would say for me in managing stress, my career in itself, 80 plus hours a week working in the hospital, all these different hats that I wear, it can weigh down to the extent that it could potentially dim my light and my purpose in different capacities. But I would say the stress and the break free from it comes from my teammate at home. So I went from knowing what a teammate was in my time as an athlete myself to finding the perfect teammate for me right at home in my husband. So it's just beautiful how God shaped both of us to come together, and that we both had an idea and understanding of what a teammate was, so that when we entered into marriage, we knew that we were not going to be able to function without having each other's back and being each other's best friends and teammates, especially since we're balancing five beautiful kids at home. So I would say my stress reliever is just being in the presence of my husband, just being in prayer with him, following in his direction. He's such a wise leader for us in the home. So I would say my stress reliever is relying on my teammate at home. Awesome. Yes.
I guess we're talking about resilient women, and I just remembered it's Rosa Parks' birthday, by the way. Shout out to Rosa. But I would say my biggest stress reliever is Candy Crush.
That's it?
That's it.
All right, Coach, you decided to coach in academic settings versus professional or club. If you had a magic wand, in what ways would you like to see colleges be better in terms of supporting college athletes, whether that's mentally or physically? Do you have any recommendations for administrators? And I'd love for you two to join in as well. But Coach first.
I think there's definitely a different pressure on athletes now than it was when certainly I competed, or when I first started coaching. It's kind of a different world. And I think social media has a big part of that. And so I think it's more of trying to kind of help them realize that that's not always the real world. And what I talk to my team about is, let's have a conversation, not a text, a conversation. You and I look each other in the eye and talk to each other, because that's one of the things I think is missing, is that interaction, because it's very easy to pick up the phone or get on Instagram. And I think the athletes and just students in general, or this generation, it's easy for them to feel like they're successful because of how many likes and how many clicks and how many follows they get, but it's not really anybody they know. And so I think it kind of gives them a false perception of what their success is, and I think they're having trouble kind of navigating that, and that might come more on the psychological training part of things, in terms of them kind of understanding that the world that's on X or Instagram or any of those things, that may not necessarily be the reality. And I think if there's a way, I don't know if there's a course or there's something, and certainly as a coach, I think we try to talk with our athletes about that. But I think it's definitely an information that they're getting that isn't necessarily helpful to their development, but I think it's good, it can be fun and that sort of thing. But I think relying on it so much as your self-worth by however many likes, and as opposed to really kind of garnering or growing some relationships with people that you can kind of look at in the eye and actually have conversations with. I think that's probably where the students, not just the athletes, but kind of where the students need the most help right now.
Healthy relationships, the best ability is availability. Doc?
Yeah, I would say that I'll speak on the professional platform, because that's just the season that I'm coming from at this point in my life. So I would say, we were blessed in that we spent 8 years with Cincinnati. So that's a long time to stay with one team, and we built a lot of close friendships through that time. And I think just from a peripheral standpoint, what I've observed is that and reflecting on my own teammates, is as an athlete, your worth is, just as piggybacking off of what you were sharing, Coach, is that your worth is more than your sport. So your sport doesn't identify who you are and the trajectory of your life or what your value is. And that's something that's hard to understand, especially as you're transitioning from, say, the National Football League, where you've committed your life for training under a sport, and then you transition from your career. You could potentially be in your mid-30s and then learning, well, what else do I love to do? And that's a hard transition to make. So I would say, from a peripheral standpoint, what I've learned and what I've observed is figuring out early, just to save the heartache later, is that your worth is more than your sport. So then as you're transitioning from the NFL, you have that foundation to stand on for whatever God has for you in store for the next step, and then just learning to advocate for yourself in the best manner forward. So I think from what we learned, and just like any other professional platform, the NFL is a business. So, and it's a blessing for me to have the experience from medical knowledge and to have lived that life, because sometimes those things collide. But learning to advocate for yourself in each of those seasons as an active player, transitioning from the league, and then as a retired player, and learning how to do that in the best manner, and usually that is because you're dependent on those surrounding you that are sharing wisdom from their life experiences. I'm looking at Ms. Puke because she's done just that. That's how you make it, and that's how you overcome in that transitional period.
We can't underestimate the power of the human connection. That's what I kind of think is missing the most. It takes very little time, and it really costs you nothing to show people that they matter. There's so many of us, even when we're talking about in the field of sports, and what the coach mentioned, just making that contact, right? Everything is so kind of cut off, and it's impersonal, and they're texting, and I'm still kind of old school, and I know that's just how I was raised, and that may be the age gap, but even they need to know, to have that human connection, that to you I matter, to the league I matter, right? Now, it doesn't mean that because I care about you, I'm going to keep you if you just, but it doesn't mean that if you don't make it, and if you're not able to stay, or NFL not for long, or whatever it is, that sort of thing, what they will remember is how you made them feel, and the fact that to my coach mattered is one of the reasons why Coach Sanders is having such a tremendous year, because they're talking about how he makes them feel. And so that's why the human connection is so important, and we can't underestimate it.
Thank you. Carmen, an ongoing debate in women's sports is men coaching girls and young women. And certainly all of the scandals and sexual assault things are not helping. As a mental performance coach, do you have an opinion one way or another regarding the increasing number of men coaching girls? Or what are some of the key messages that you share with athletes?
Well, I don't particularly have a problem with men coaching girls, even though I know where the hesitation and reservation comes from, some of the atrocities committed by some of these girls and women that they were supposed to protect. But if we're honest, there are female coaches that abuse their positions as well. So I don't particularly just categorize that as far as a fear or a concern just for men over women's sports. What I would tell my athletes, and what I encourage them to do, is you have to establish your own personal constitution. You have to have boundaries set, and then you have to equip them with the tools of what they need to do when those boundaries are crossed. What that looks like, and it could be really, really simple. It is, I think Hagar mentioned it earlier when we're talking about, I want to get them to remove the fear of failure, right? The fear of not being in the league, the fear of the threat of not being able to play, the fear of my parents are counting on me, the fear of I can't lose the scholarship, the fear of that need that I have to get it done no matter what, at whatever cost. If you don't have boundaries to set, you find that it really comes at every cost. And what you're doing is when you have that compromise, you're actually, the impact of that is greater than what we see on the person's face. So these are the things that I would stress, the importance of establishing those boundaries, because when you don't have them set, you find that people do everything, not just anything, okay? And you don't know how to deal with it because you haven't established a set constitution, a personal constitution for yourself.
Coach, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I think there's, when I look at the growth of women's volleyball, especially, over the past couple of seasons, one of the things that would always stand out is, now it's a Power Four, because the Pac-12 is no longer around, but in terms of the big programs, how many head coaches were women? And I've noticed that there are a lot more now. In terms of the big money programs, and for those of you probably who wouldn't follow it, John Cook, who was coaching at Nebraska, which is one of the best programs in the history of women's volleyball, just retired, and Danny Busboom Kelly, who played for him as a student athlete and went on to do really well at Louisville, is taking over that position. So that's, when we look at the growth of women coaches, certainly in the sport of volleyball, that is huge. The fact that Nebraska, that has just their operating budget alone is a couple of $1 million. They don't really know what to do with the money sometimes, Coach would say, because they had so much to spend. And the fact that Danny got that job. So I think there's certainly more opportunity for women to be head coaches, but I agree. I think for everybody, you have to kind of set up boundaries, and you have to make sure you stick with them. And so one of the things, and certainly when I was at George Mason, but even now is, the players, they want to, first of all, I'm not on anything other than Facebook, and apparently old people only use Facebook now, but I would have players that would say, hey, can I be your friend on whatever platform? And I was like, no, you can't, because right now, I'm your coach. It doesn't mean I don't want to be friendly with you, but we're not friends. Yeah. And so now when you're done playing for me, that's when I might add them to my Facebook friends, kind of thing. But I think that's one of the things is that we want to make sure that the athletes recognize that the coach is there to help them grow, help them learn the sport, help them kind of navigate life, and hopefully 10 or 15, 20 years from now, I'll continue to get the phone calls from some players going, now that they got a family, they got a mortgage, all of a sudden now I get an email or a phone call from them saying, oh yeah, I was a nut job when I played for you. Thank you for the lesson. But I wasn't their friend back then. I was their coach. And so I hopefully I helped them kind of learn to kind of navigate things. But I think that's the main thing, is making sure that on both sides, athletes as well as coaches, you set up a boundary, and there's a line you don't cross, and you just have to be good with that. And I agree, if players feel like they have to be, they feel desperate, then they might be willing to cross that line when they shouldn't have to.
Great advice. Doc, tell us about your academic research and swimming safety, which is so important for our community.
Sure. So my focus on concussion started back in my time at Tulane. So this was actually before I had met my husband. And it happened because I fell under a physician that I admired, who was a Tulane head team physician at the time. And he really taught me all that I know at this point in time. So I had shared that I was a part of the founding group for the trust being earned to Tulane University. And then it just kind of continued to grow. So as I transitioned to the University of Cincinnati for my medical training program, I fell under new leadership, and I learned, different impressions and different different takes on different capacities to concussion work. So, and it still continues to today. So, 15 plus years later, I'm still learning more every day. With regards to water safety, so what Dr. Stroman is sharing of is, as the vice president of the Off-the-Field NFL Wives Association, we decided as a sisterhood, and so what this sisterhood is, it's a nonprofit organization that's the official NFL Wives Association, and we're comprised of significant others of those that are in the league. And it's active, transition, retirement, so the wide spectrum, and we have a collective reach of 600 members, but we can have a capacity to reach over 6,000. So a large sisterhood that's committed to service, and we came up as a sisterhood of what do we want to stand for these next few years. And what we've learned is that there are some things that you do out of necessity and some things that you do from passion. And for us, water safety was both. So there's an epidemic in drowning, and it's the leading cause of death in children 1 to 4. And as a physician, and it's my field of specialty, I unfortunately have to deal with the consequences of drowning and seeing what the patients experience, seeing what hazard it causes on the family and how it breaks things apart because of this tragedy. So what can we do as a sisterhood to stand on the other side? So we committed to launching a water safety campaign, and we're thankful because we have just the best partners alongside of us. So YMCA USA, who's the founders of Swimming Lessons, so they're coming up on their 175th year anniversary. The USA Swimming Foundation, who stands in championing water safety and committed to their, to our own national USA swimming team. The American Heart Association and their work in CPR, who's especially taken off over the past few years, and their commitment to life-saving skills. And I can go on and so forth. So we've committed to being at all 32 NFL CD sites. I actually just got out of the pool about an hour ago, where we were hosting 200 kids from the New Orleans community, and we taught them how to swim. We spent 3 hours and we taught them how to swim, and you should have seen these kids in the water. It was so humbling to see, fear in some of the kids' eyes, and within, an hour or so, just to see them just relax a bit and just to enjoy the water. And they're doing this alongside NFL players, Olympic gold medalists in the water, so they see that their heroes are there. Their heroes are also learning how to swim, and that being some of the NFL players. So it's been very humbling to be a part of that, and I'm so excited to see where we go for the next 32 teams.
Thank you. Thank you for that work. So let's talk a little bit more about brain health. What strategies have you used to stay focused, whether it's nutrition, exercise, faith, or other? What are you doing to keeping that brain firing well? Coach?
Well, I would say we do some mental imagery. We'll do some video. Sometimes it's just a matter of just relax and see yourself, performing things. Every time in your mental practice, you're a first-team All-American. You never make any mistakes. You do it exactly the way you want to do it. We've had players close their eyes on the court and just, giving them some space and say, okay, perform the skill, away from the net, because if their eyes are closed, they could end up all over the place. But see yourself doing it the way you want to do it, and remember how it felt, and you can replicate that again. And so when we talk more about the process as opposed to the outcome, because, probably in most sports, it's very result oriented as opposed to the process. So we'll kind of talk to the players about doing it a certain way, building success and building confidence. And how do you build confidence is by being successful. How do you build success? By replicating something intentionally over and over again so that you feel like, oh, I can do that. And so kind of keeping them more focused on, I don't care if the ball lands in the floor, in the court. It's like, how did you contact the ball? What were you thinking as you were approaching the hit? And, we'll ask a lot of questions like, what did you see? What did that look like? What were you thinking at the time? And not, oh, it was a great kill or it was a great block. It's probably more about the kind of the process as opposed to the outcome.
Visualization. Hagar?
Yeah, I would say for me, when I think of brain health or overall body health, for me, it's very much tied into my spirit. So just a metaphor that I rely on often is, bear with me through this quick story. So there was a man, and he had animal fightings, and somebody asked him, how do you always manage to know which, we'll just say, dog was going to win at the end of every match? And he said, well, it's simple. Whichever dog I fed first and I fed the most, that's the one that was going to win that day. And that's true for me and my spirit. So am I feeding my flesh, or am I feeding my spirit every day? And as my time and as an athlete, I very much understand what reaction time means, especially in swimming. How quickly can I get off the block? How quickly can I respond? Whatever it may be. I've carried those things into my life to this day. How fast is my reaction time to take those thoughts that are on the flesh, to take those thoughts of fear and worry and anxiety and stress, and how quickly can I turn those thoughts back to God and back to His Word and back to His truths? So I would say brain health for me is very much tied into my spirit, and where my relationship with God is standing.
That's a good one. Yes, for me, it's quite similar to what the ladies have mentioned. If we're just talking about myself, I would leave that with faith is primary to me. But a lot of times our athletes, faith is primary to them as well. But we will incorporate visualization, meditation, things of that nature. But one thing that is really that we focus on is actually building their mental toughness by changing how their perception of things. An example is this: I always tell them your feelings are real, but they aren't always factual, right? Because sometimes you don't have to think about everything that comes to your mind, right? And what you perceive as correct doesn't mean that it actually is correct. So we will challenge the faultiness. And so what we're doing is in our program, we're talking about how you reframe and reshape and refocus your thought, and we challenge that. So we teach them how to do it. Also, a fun thing that we do with our athletes, every athlete has their tagline, so to speak, or their thing, right? That's just primarily them. And I currently have a collegiate tennis player where she just spouts hootie hoo in the middle of her matches, that sort of thing. Well, hootie hoo, we created an acrostic for it. And so through that acrostic is we kind of break down all of the things. So like the H's, for instance, I'll just give you a couple of them. The H is how do you observe what you see? What do you see, like the big picture, the overall picture? And then we'll tell them observe what you can attack, not all of the things, right? So we break it down, and you have a hootie who somebody else is an expletive, but I'm not going to tell you what that expletive is, but we create an acrostic for that. But it's just something that personalizes it, because I want to know what's your thinking, what do you tell yourself, right? And so anything that you tell yourself, we personalize that, and we build an acrostic that has all of the key foundational things to help reframe, reshape, and refocus.
Thank you. Before we take one or two questions from the audience, I would like to ask you all, what advice do you have for the mothers, the partners of men in particular who play elite sports? Coach?
I would say be supportive, certainly, and recognize that, you know, if they're playing certainly at an elite level, NFL level, you know, even a collegiate, you know, level, whether it's, you know, NAIA, junior college, NCAA Division I, it doesn't matter. It's more of kind of be supportive, and, you know, you might be there to listen to them vent about something, and maybe help them kind of come up with some ideas as to how they can kind of help their situation. But that would probably be my.
Thank you. Doc?
Yeah, I'd say we're coming up on 13 years of marriage, so still young, so to say, but I would say a transformational point in our marriage is when we stopped seeing each other as probably perfect individuals. So by seeing each other, I guess through the eyes of how God would see each other. And then that allowed us to extend much more grace to each other when we recognized that listen, this is a child of God. I will respect you as a child of God, and I will honor you as a child of God. I know that you're not going to walk a perfect path, and this works both ways. And then from that spirit, it's allowed us to extend much grace to each other. So I would say that, plus just like our, you know, chaplain said at our wedding, forgive, forgive, forgive. So, we're called to forgive not just once, but multiple times, and that's how we've sustained is forgive. Understand that this is someone that you respect, that's someone that you honor, and keep going, keep sustaining through.
Forgiveness. Carmen?
Yeah. One thing that I would actually encourage everyone to do is probably what I hope a lot of women or partners are able to do, and that is just to love and support without additional stress and judgment. Also, too, I think it's imperative that you are a soft place to land for them. I think that's really important, but also pay attention, right? Pay attention to what you see. Everyone doesn't yet equate or value mental wellness the way that they do physical wellness, right? And so, but it can have a great impact on it and on them. So also adding the support, but being mindful being vigilant of how I can support, and then also because sometimes we do have, for instance, in our practice, it's easier for our athletes to come to us under the guise sometime of mental performance coaching. But then 76% of it, we talk about past traumas. They're just not comfortable with it. So however you come is fine, but reinforcing that you're actually exuding emotional intelligence when you can say what you need, as opposed to there's nothing wrong with me, or I got it. So that's what I would stress.
I'll just add, everybody has a story, and so let's be gentle with one another.
Yeah.
Gentle. It's a very, very powerful word, and it means a lot in healthy relationships. Do we have questions from the audience? We'll take one or two for this panel. Any questions?
Tell us who you are.
My name is Winston Demon. I'm with Floor Government Group and Department of Energy. I'm not clinical, so this is very interesting to me. But what is your thought in thinking of sports, how NIL is affecting the psyche of the kids, and not everyone is going to go to the NBA or NFL, but some of these kids are thinking about NIL and thinking that's how they're going to be rich.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Name, image, and likeness. Coach?
Well, I think it's, even though the NAIA actually voted for the NILs for student athletes before the NCAA did, but I think it's one of those things where the toothpaste is out of the tube. It's one of those things where, just so you guys know, like a few decades ago, in the NCAA, they used to have a restricted earnings coach position. And you could only make so much money if you were the second or your third assistant, depending on the sport. And then at some point, somebody took them to court, and they said, "This is America. You can't tell me how much money I can make." And so the NCAA had to get rid of it. And so now, there's, coaches are making more money regardless of, if the school can afford a second or third coach. And so, kind of as an overcorrection, I think on some level, certainly at the Division I level, where you have, let's say, Tim Tebow when he was at Florida. If there was a number 15 jersey in that bookstore, you didn't have to have his name on the back of it. Everybody knew it was a Tim Tebow jersey, and the school made millions. Now, Tim Tebow is not hurting for cash by any stretch, but it's one of those things where universities were making millions. I mean, we're talking millions of dollars. Every time a team goes to a bowl game, their school gets millions of dollars, their conference gets millions of dollars. So I think on some level, some of the top NCAA schools said, look, we're going to take our ball and go home. You need to do something. And so what happened then was the NCAA came up with the cost of attendance. So let's say the cost of attendance to go to, say, Kentucky is $40,000, and the athletes are getting a full ride, tuition, room and board, books, that sort of thing. But really the cost of going to Kentucky is more than that, because you've got transportation, you've got incidentals. So then it ended up being called gap dollars. So when I was at Virginia Tech, one of my jobs was to write up for the student athletes what their gap money was. And so that was the difference between the tuition, room and board, basically a full ride scholarship, and what it really costs to go to school in Blacksburg. And that was probably about $2,500 a semester. So the kids were getting a check or deposit for $2,500 a semester. And so, but then if you were at Louisville, the cost of living in Louisville, Kentucky is higher than Blacksburg, Virginia. So those kids were getting $5,000. And so depending on where you lived, whatever your financial aid department said at your school, how much it really cost for you to go to school there, the kids were getting that. And then it became, all right, so the schools are still making millions of dollars. So then they said, okay, name, image, and likeness. And so, and I can turn on pretty much any television here, and I could see a commercial for an LSU student. And I could tell they're LSU because they've got the purple and gold. It doesn't, and you kind of know that, I'm pretty sure that kid's on the baseball team. And so, this name, image, and likeness thing came up where, they could, like a local car, or furniture, whatever, they can sponsor an athlete, and so the athletes are getting money. But what's happening is, because this is America, and you can't tell somebody how much money they can make, you've got high school students now that are getting NIL deals before they've shot one basket, before they've hit one ball, before they've done anything. And so I know, for example, a former NBA player, his daughter's going to go play volleyball at Penn State. As a junior in high school, she had an NIL deal. And so the problem with that is because the kids are chasing the money now. And so sometimes, especially you've got the NCAA portal, just to give you guys some ideas. So the NCAA transfer portal was set up, and it happened kind of around COVID, and there were some schools, certainly because of COVID, they couldn't even compete at all. But you have some other kids that are able to compete, so they came up this portal because back before COVID, if you were a football player or a basketball player at the NCAA level and you wanted to transfer, you had to sit automatically, regardless of whether your school wanted you to, transfer or not, you had to sit. And when COVID hit, they said it's not fair for some school, even in the same conference, like if you were in the Pac-12, you got kids that are at Stanford. They can't play because the state of California said you guys aren't doing anything. But if you're at Oregon, you're actually able to compete. So they came up with this transfer portal so the kids now, NCAA and Instagram has even started some for the other divisions, but they're able to have, this transfer, and they get in there. And so kids now are looking at the transfer portal as a way to, okay, I'm going to go to George Mason, for example, where I was for a year, and then I'm going to put my name in the portal, because if I can find a better NIL deal, I know for a fact there are a couple of girls that have left the school from the Big Ten, and they were getting a good amount of money because the Big Ten is one of those conferences where they can afford to give their kids NIL deals. They're leaving to go to another school because they're getting $80,000 a year now. And so that's the kind of money that's out there. And so unfortunately now, to see somebody spend 4 years at a particular school is becoming rare, because they put themselves in the portal, they're chasing the money. And so then you have to look at, are those schools preparing those athletes for taxes, learning how to handle their money? Because there was an ESPN 30 for 30 that was called Broke, and they were talking about all the professional athletes who, they signed whatever deals and everything, and they became broke. I think the next one is going to be, as a result of the NIL, how many student athletes have spent all the money, and then they didn't learn how to manage it. There was a football player who was playing for one school, and he quit mid-season because the school did not give him the NIL money that they promised him when they signed him. And he decided to quit mid-season. And so those are the kind of things that are happening. And like I said, the money's good if you can get it, but if you don't learn how to manage it, which I think a lot of these kids have no idea that, Shaquille O'Neal kind of joked around, not really joking, but when he first got his first check when he was playing for the Lakers, he's like, who's FICA and why did they take my money? There's going to be a lot of kids that are going to be in that situation.
Yeah. Thank you for that detail. Let's give her a hand for that. And I'm hopeful that everyone can see the connection to our community and to brain health, especially when we talk about stress. Whether it's the administrators, the parents, the coaches, the advisors, this affects us greatly. Another question?
One last
Do we have one more? Okay. So, you did?
We did have a hand? Oh, give me yeah, exactly. I got to start running too, right?
Hi, thank you all for your wisdom and your knowledge and your experience. I really appreciate hearing from you all. So I had a question more about kind of life after sport and managing those transitions out of sport and the athlete identity, and how we can kind of promote brain health and cognitive health and mental health in the context of all of these transitions from your own experiences and your own work.
Yeah, Yeah, I would say it's come up a few times, is, where's the foundation? So whether it's faith, family, friends, whatever it may be, what is the foundation that you're going to stand on as you're transitioning from sport? So when I think about NFL, thinking early, what's life going to look like after football play? What do you desire to do? What are you passionate about outside of football? And that's sometimes a hard question to ask, and sometimes it's still tied to football, so whether it be coaching or whatever it may be, but just extending the mind to think about what is the future, what is life going to look like, and just thinking about the cost and the weight of things. So on the professional platform, as you were speaking, Coach, I was just thinking there's such a big cost to money, and I'm not talking about just counting dollars. Money in itself brings, relationship questions, loyalty, commitment, financial, training that you have to consider. So really keeping those costs in mind, how can you better prepare yourself early so that as you're making that transition, you're on better footing for success for 20, 30 years to come? Your life extend past yourself. For us and our family, we think about generations to come. We were blessed with the platform of the NFL, and it's our job to protect that for generations to come and build on that for generations to come. So it's extending your mind past yourself, preparing a foundation for what life might look like up ahead, would be our encouragement.
And the good thing about what Hagar just mentioned, in order for you to do that, you have to consider yourself outside of the sport. You have to then know who you are and remember that it's something that you do. It's not necessarily who you are, right? And so in order to consider those things, oftentimes it can also transpire and happen and evolve into that with a level of maturity. I didn't say age, because that age doesn't necessarily bring about maturity. But as you mature and you see yourself and you're able to look at the big picture and not worrying about $80,000 in NIL and chasing the dollars, that sort of thing. But what happens after? Who am I? You'll be amazed at what people say when you ask them, who are you? They'll tell you about what they do. No, that's what you do. That's not who you are. And that's the beginning of all of that. You have to have that level of revelation in order to then say, what do I want to do? How do I want to, what legacy do I want to leave, and that sort of thing, yeah.
Anything, Coach? I would just say, think about us, think about yourself and your identity. Are you just a professor? Are you just a scientist? Are you just a researcher? Are you just a wife, a husband, a partner? And so just like the athlete, they've spent years and hours in training and developing, and they have multiple identities as well, just like you. And so we have to look at them just like we look at ourselves. They're often in the spotlight. They get the interviews. They're on TV and everything. But we have the same challenges as athletes, elite athletes, trying to manage the multiple identities that we have. I want to give a big thanks. I would like for you all to give a big thanks to this amazing panel.